Hi, Christy here. I've got my Akashic Records open and I'm going to do what I've done in the past where I'm going to ask some questions in the records and see what kind of information I get back. The first question is, what do we do about judgment and self-judgment? What helps to loosen these? So I'm going to tune into that and see what kind of response I get from the records as I look at this. So the first thing that comes back is that judgment and self-judgment are sourced by fear, not surprisingly. It means that we feel like something is shaky, something is not right, something needs to be fixed in some way, whether it's something in us or something in the world. So part of this is comforting our own fear, our own concern that things are not okay. Something's wrong, something needs to be fixed, something's broken. And so often we think that what we have in mind for the world, for the universe, for the plan, if you will, is better than what is actually there. So when we bump into people that we're like, oh, why are they like that? Or we bump into something in ourselves, oh, why am I like that? This is actually, based on what I'm seeing in here, an invitation for expanding our love, our compassion, our willingness to contain, expand the container that holds everything with greater love and greater compassion, which is not easy. And certain astrological signs, like mine, for example, Leo and Virgo, have particular difficulties with judgment and comparison. It's part of how we are wired and part of what we come here to overcome. So if we put this in the category of, can we be softer? Can we be more lenient, if you will? Less exacting is the word that's coming. That's part of what loosens this. It's a dropping of the shoulders from the Jyutsu perspective. That's one of the things that's sort of a mantra. Drop the shoulders, be the smile. So if we can find some amusement, curiosity and humor are always helpful in these kind of things of, whoop, that just happened again, or I'm noticing something that's ironic or comical or that I can take less seriously. Because that's a big part of this whole judgment thing, is taking stuff so seriously that it sort of morphs into the side of unacceptable. So if we can take it a little less seriously, then there's sort of breathing room. It's no longer so fixed, such a thing to struggle against, and becomes instead something you can breathe around, something that you can hold in your awareness without fighting with it. There's so much in here about resistance and fighting and opposition. And when we're doing that, we're having sort of an internal war. And as you know, war historically for humanity has been a huge problem. So part of this is about cultivating inner peace. And inner peace can then hopefully be reflected in outer peace as well. Let me just see if there's anything else about judgment and self-judgment and loosening it that is useful here. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, well, the classic, don't judge the judging. I used to get so hung up on this years ago, pretty much when I was starting my journey of like, I can't stop judging and I can't stop judging the judging. And instead of being like, well, of course, it's the Akashic Records thing. Of course, of course, of course. Of course I'm judging. Of course I'm noticing things. Of course I'm not just in discernment, which is a lighter way of differentiating, but I'm in judgment full on. All right, of course I am, because that's my habit, because that's my pattern, because that's one of my obstacles. So this is again about really being on your own side about the things you're experiencing. All right, on to the next question. Ta-da! All right, here's what I wrote down. How might we respond to corruption of all sorts? Ooh, it's a big one. Let me just see here. And let me just preface this with saying, this crossed my mind as I was writing my questions. I got an email from Ruth Ben Gayat, or a Substack note. And she noted that propaganda is a form of corruption, which I thought was really interesting. You're corrupting information. You're trying to lead someone falsely somewhere. And so that's what made me think of this question. How to respond to corruption of all sorts. All right, so there's so much in here about integrity, about our integrity, about the integrity of those around us, about the things we hold up as our values and our willingness to subvert those values or allow others to get away with things. This isn't about, holding people's feet to the fire all the time, but it definitely in there is an aspect of let's expect from people what we would expect from ourselves and hold up a high level of integrity, meaning we're in unity, that there's not part of us that's disjointed or corrupted, but rather that we are consistent and we are willing to speak up when people are doing things, saying things, acting in a certain way that does not align with what's in the highest good of all. And obviously there's rampant corruption with political parties and so on. It could be corruption from the sense of a corrupted morality. They're talking about, with the sexual assault type of things and certainly all the financial things are kind of the obvious corruption. But it's sort of like any way in which a system or person or organization can be diseased. They'll have some sort of malady in a way. So a lot of this is about bringing the antidotes to those things rather than ignoring them, sweeping under the rug, sort of desensitizing ourselves to it. Like, oh, well, that's okay. Everyone's doing it. No, it's not okay just because everyone's doing it or everyone of that sort of person does it. It really is about coming back to being unified within whatever the unit is we're talking about, whether it's a person or a country, politically, or, a company, an institution, whatever. It's sort of a not tolerating what we know is not okay. And there is some amount, as I'm looking at here, there is some amount of agreement on what is and isn't okay when we're acting in the highest good. There's certainly people, for example, that are like, immigrants are bad, we're gonna demonize them, and anything we do there is okay. But when you're working with people who have the highest good of all in their hearts, it's going to be things that are good for humanity, not harming some portion of humanity. So unity and integrity is what they're talking about, which is very interesting. I've never really thought about corruption, unity, and integrity as being linked. But there you go. That's my little take from the records today. All right, let's move on to number 3. All right, I wrote down, why do we become preoccupied with the idea of being stuck? Lots and lots of people will come to me and say, do I have a block? Am I stuck? What's going on? Why am I struggling? And why can't I get to where I think I'm supposed to be, which is not where I am now? So let me look a little deeper into this and see what this looks like. All right. So part of this is impatience. Part of it is, we want to be somewhere else. We want to be in this magical place where we think it's going to be comfortable and easy and, oh yes, we've arrived and that's great. We finally got there. But the records are kind of bringing out a level of humor to this around, and then you're going to want to be in the next place, which is classic for us, right? That was the other thing they were bringing out before, is this idea of not wanting what we have, being in a place of imagining something that's future oriented, a possibility. And then the yearning sort of overcomes the journey. It's being very much product oriented instead of process oriented. I want to be at the end instead of going through whatever it takes to get to the other side. And there's always this energy of stuck is because you can't see the evidence of the micro movements that are already happening, that it is in progress. And then we just don't necessarily have the bird's eye view to see what it is that's happening under the surface. So a lot of this really is sort of making peace with the fact that where you are is exactly where you're supposed to be. You can never be off of your path. And that if you're stuck, which I don't really believe in stuck, that's exactly where you need to be. And can you bring compassion around, oh yeah, of course I'm frustrated because I want to be somewhere else. I want to be in the promised land where everything is lovely and beautiful and there's nirvana, rather than struggling, having discomfort, wondering what's wrong with me, and so on. Let me just see if there's anything else about this. Yeah, a lot of it really is questioning whether stuck is a real thing, and how the more we focus on stuck, the more stuck we feel. What you focus on expands. So perhaps instead of focusing on that, and I've said this before, focusing on what is moving, what is changing, what is shifting, even if it's just a feeling inside of you, an idea you've had, or some other aspect of your life that's in motion, that can allow you to remember, oh yeah, I'm not stuck everywhere. There's just this little thing that it's kind of grinding the gears a little bit. It's sort of not where I want it to be. All right, those are my 3 questions for the day. I hope you found them helpful. I'd love to hear in the comments below if anything strikes you. Do you feel stuck? Or do you feel like you've got some momentum going? All right, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And in the meantime, please go be brilliant.